Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Brett?
Pray with me. Father, we want to thank you for all the blessings that you bestowed on us each and every day. Family, friends, and health are so important to all of us. As our summer break begins, please be with our teachers, staff, and students as they take vacations and trips and participate in summertime activities. Keep them safe and return them to our district in the fall with the enthusiasm needed to be successful in all endeavors. And be with our men and women of the armed forces as they protect us and they serve here and abroad. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Roll call.
Dr. Kincaid.
Here.
Mr. Newsom.
Here.
Mr. Riley.
Here.
Mrs. Troop.
Present.
Mrs. Zimmershed. Here.
Public comments, nobody signed for public comments. All right, we're going to go over to presentations. Potential board discussions. This is on the mural made by the bottle caps. Mary?
I didn't bring my glasses. I left them in the truck.
You want mine?
They're all right here. I can't see out of those. Okay, do you see the? Yeah, right there. I got it. I'll do it by Braille. I'm gonna just show you the video first. Wasn't what I intended, but that's what we're gonna go with.
I've been heartbroken, broke down, hard up and hard fought. Misunderstood, misguided, and I've missed by a long shot. I understand firsthand, I've been where you've been. Don't you forget, every sunset will become a sunrise soon again. So be bold and be brave and beware of those schemes. Stay razor sharp, find your mark as you go chase your dreams. Watch out for those dangers, always dancing in the dark. When the shadows of the night shoot out the lights, I know you'll be the spark. So promise me before you go, follow your arrow. You will pray to never stray from straight and narrow. Be steadfast and steady, always be ready. Aim for the stars and the sky. Take heart, pull it back and let it fly. Good things come to those who pray, so don't you chalk it up to chance. And never let your arrow be lit by arrogance. Fare you ever full of courage, show this world your heaven sent. Keep a good head on your shoulders, every arrow needs to find a piece of flint. So promise me before you go, follow your arrow. You will pray to never stray from straight and narrow. Be steadfast and steady, always be ready. Aim for the stars and the sky. Take heart, pull it back and let it fly on the wings of an angel. Let it fly with the grace of a dove. Through the lightning and thunder, never aimlessly wander. Let it fly with kindness and love. Let it fly with kindness and love. Let it fly. Let it fly. Promise me before you go, follow your arrow. You will pray to never stray from straight and narrow. Be steadfast and steady, always be ready. Aim for the stars in the sky. Take heart, pull it back, and promise me before you go, follow your arrow.
Okay, as you know, I'm Mary Morse. I teach art at Roosevelt Elementary School. This project came about 2 years ago in the fall. I had a contest come across my desk. And I looked at it, it was wanting to tie recycling together, and they wanted reports written, and I thought, oh, it's too early in the year, that would be impossible. But it piqued my interest. So I went online, I looked on the internet, saw the examples, and I thought, oh, I could do so much better. And then put it back in my mind because I thought, oh my goodness, there are ways, you would need so many lids. I would never get enough lids. That percolated in my brain, and then a year ago in May, we were at a track meet for our school, and we had a little boy who had been given more than one chance. And they finally said, Mary, you have the car. You either need to take him back or watch him for about 30, 40 minutes because he's reached his last. And I said, all right, I got this. And I gave him a sack because I had looked at all the lids on the bottles all over the track. And I said, okay, we're going to have an Easter egg hunt. You're going to hunt lids. I said, here's your sack. Let's go. And he said, Mrs. Morse, why am I doing this? And I said, well, your crazy art teacher has an idea of painting with lids. Now, I will tell you, in my mind, I thought, he's going to forget, school's going to be out in a week, I'm going to throw him away, and everything will be great. I got to school the next morning, and that child had been waiting there by my door, sitting on his backpack. And as soon as I got there, he said, when do we start painting pictures? And I thought, okay, girl, you have to own it. So I got online really fast, and by the time classes started, I had all the examples that I had seen, and I pitched it to the kids. I wanted their help. I had to have their help. So we ended the school year, and I said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to save all the lids all summer, bring them back to me, and we will figure out what we're going to paint with them. I had no idea at that point what we were going to do. 20,000 lids later, I still have trouble getting them not to bring me lids. But 20,000 lids, and they came from all over. I even had a retired teacher mail them to me from Mississippi. So we got to school, we had an Oklahoma theme this year, and so they asked if we were talking about all the things Oklahoma, Thunder, Buffaloes, OU, OSU, and I said, let's make it a little broader. And finally, one little girl was on her way out. She turned around and she said, Mrs. Morse, we say the pledge to the Oklahoma flag every day. Can we do that? And I thought, yes, we can. So that was where the idea came, and I have 3 of my students here with me. I have Colt Duke, Henry O'Neill, and Ava O'Neill. Will you 3 come up here? You probably saw all 3 of them in the video, but I wanted them to just take a moment and tell you what their part they did and what they liked about the project. Okay, Colt.
Board members, I painted and I counted and sorted lids.
Okay, Henry.
Board members, I put the lids on the board to put them where they would be.
Yep, place lids. Awesome. Ava.
I painted, I counted the lids, sorted the lids, not by myself. I then painted the background of the blue here before we ever put the lids on. And all of us helped try to figure out what kind of colors we wanted on the lids, what kind of colors of lids we wanted on in different spots.
I had to get creative. When you have that many lids stacked up in your room, you have to figure out what to do with them. So we drew pictures with them, we traced circles, we did everything. We averaged, we counted, we sorted. actually to get them all placed so that I could have all of my students, all 350, at least have their hands on a lid so that they felt like that they had a part in it. I did my review at the end of the year because we finished it up by May 1st. And so in April, I had the students pair up. They got to answer questions. And if they answered it right, they got to go pick 5 lids, put them on the board. And if it was a really hard question and they could give me more information than I asked, they got 10 lids. And that's how we got, there were 2,125 lids on there. And that's how we got them on there. But then I had more help. I had volunteers come after school on the weekend, and we put the lucite, and it is going to be mounted in the front foyer of the school. And a lot of my students said if we have the Oklahoma flag, we really need the American flag. So we're going to do that.
The project.
Yeah, we're going to do that in the fall so that we have a matched pair on each side of the library. But thank you.
That'll look gorgeous in the foyer. Good job.
Thank you all for coming.
Mary's quite a creative art teacher. As she said, they're focusing on Oklahoma at Roosevelt, and she did a huge shape of an Oklahoma flag with dyed coffee filters. It's gorgeous. Is it still there in that one?
We actually took it
Oh.
down. I had some friends write on it.
Okay.
So I'm thinking how I'm going to get that back up and just do the background. But yes, they drew on coffee filters. We sprayed it with water, let them tie-dye it, spread the ink all over, and over 1,000 coffee filters were
was
put on
gorgeous.
to make the state of Oklahoma. Looks like a big old rug.
Good.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you all. Next item will be superintendent's report.
Okay, a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about. I know that Brett did an informal poll of our board members for a special board meeting on Wednesday, June the 20th at 12 o'clock. And this is for your consideration to accept bids on the surfacing of the Roosevelt parking lot that has no surface on it. So we're going to take bids on both asphalt and concrete. Is that correct?
Yes.
Brett, but we need to have a special board meeting so that you can approve that, because that will be a project that will need to get started on ASAP so that we're ready for school to start. As you know, we're moving Wildcat Academy over to that facility, so there will be some increased parking, and it'll be imperative for that to be completed by the time school starts. Any questions for Brett about the special board meeting? Brett, when are those bids?
On the 19th,
So the day after.
trying to get them approved the next day so they can get after it.
Okay, the second thing I wanted to talk to you about as we're wrapping up the end of the year are some legislative hot topics. And some of these things you've already heard before, but I think it's a good point just to bring them to light once again. I want to talk first a little bit about the state of our state in education. And I don't have to tell you, you've heard this 1,000 times, that we have taken a decade of budget cuts, and probably the most significant effect is that teachers are leaving the state in droves. As you know, we don't have enough quality candidates. They're lacking in their classroom management, their pedagogy, how to teach students with special needs. So when we get teachers in, we are working harder than ever to train them as teachers, because a lot of them haven't been trained as teachers. So prior to this last passage of the fiscal year GA, or general appropriations, you've seen continued reductions in our state aid since 2009. In the past 3 years, schools have had to take mid-year budget cuts totaling over $79.5 million due to revenue failures. This is an interesting fact that 1 out of 5 school districts, that's over 90 school districts in Oklahoma, are on a 4-day school week. And the interesting thing about this, it's not that they're saving that much more money, but it is a definite teacher recruitment tool. So that's why a lot of schools are doing it. Emergency teaching certificates are at an all-time high. For this last year, 1,943 emergency certificates were approved, which is a 500% increase. In 2011, which doesn't seem that long ago, there were only 32 emergency certificates approved in the entire state. So 1 in every 7 students in Oklahoma is taught by an emergency certified teacher. Currently, we have 19 emergency or alternatively certified teachers for this last school year. I anticipate that we will even have a greater number. Starting 7 years ago, I think I applied for 1 emergency certification, and it was a big ordeal. Now it's an online process. Something that you may not know is emergency certificates are even good for 2 years now. And I don't think that the general public realizes what a crisis is with the teacher shortage, because we always make things work with our budget cuts. We may not hire back a custodian, and people don't realize that. But our classrooms, as you all know, have gotten increasingly larger. Charter schools and now our virtual schools are receiving more and more state aid dollars at midterm because there's a lot of student growth in charter schools and virtual schools, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I've shared this with you before, but our state-paid health insurance premium costs continue to consume larger portions of state appropriations to schools. And teachers' pay should move from last to second in the region, from 47th in the nationwide to somewhere in the middle of the pack. Now, this is because of House Bill 1023XX is the first state-paid teacher pay raise in over a decade. So let's talk about some of the effects that schools have seen due to the state of our education. Again, I can't emphasize enough the severe teacher shortage crises. Since the 2013-14 school year, we have in Oklahoma 700 fewer teachers with increased student enrollment of about 15,000 students, which means our class sizes across the state are expanding. And at OU, Mr. Layton went to the career fair. At OU, there were 25 education graduates at OU. And when he went to Northwestern, we had an admin council, and I jokingly told the administrators that he was down recruiting their 11 candidates and their 2 candidates. And he came back and he said, "You said that as a joke. They only had 11 at Northwestern." And that's really one of our big feeders for our teachers here in Ponca City. Let me talk to you just a little bit about where we are right now with our hiring for 18-19. So far, we've had 50 resignations for the next school year. Now, since I've done this, we've had 2 more. So 52, we're anticipating 2 more tomorrow because other districts are having board meetings. So that'll put us at 54, I think, tomorrow. 4 positions we absorbed. We lost some people at midterm, and we restructured some of our classes, and we absorbed those positions. There's 4 positions that we won't be refilling. We have 8 positions left to fill. Well, 10 now, and probably 12 tomorrow. June 19th is a deadline for a teacher to resign, or they're deemed under contract with a district, and that's a rotating date. The law states that they have 15 days within the first Monday of June to resign. Otherwise, they're deemed under contract. Now, we try to work with teachers. You've got double issues if you hold them to their contract. We will have some bring in their resignation at 4 o'clock on the 19th. That's happened every year that I can remember, probably since the last 5 or 6 years. But the only thing that we can do if we hold them to their contract, and more districts are doing that, is hold their certificate. And for accreditation, your certificate has to be on file with the district. But here's the thing, if they go to Kansas or Texas, doesn't matter if they have that Oklahoma certificate. If they're leaving the profession altogether, they don't care if they have a certificate or not. So what I'm saying is we're going to have resignations beyond June 19th. In Oklahoma, over 90 school districts have moved to a 4-day week, and I mentioned this to you earlier. It's not about funding, it is more about teacher recruitment. Including benefits, Oklahoma ranked at 48th in the nation and 50th in our region. We're currently ranked 47th in the nation in per pupil funding and spend almost $1,700 per pupil less than our bordering states. Now, one thing that I will have to tell you, these numbers do not reflect the most recent revenue funding packages that were passed in April of 2018. So if the raise goes through and nothing's challenged, we should rank 28th in the nation in teacher pay, and then we should be second in the region in average teacher pay. That's if all other states remain static. But, they're continually trying to increase their pay because they want the best teachers in the nation. A recap of the 2018 legislative session. This was the second regular session of the 56th Oklahoma legislature. 1,953 new bills and joint resolutions were filed this session, and 1987 bills were carried over from last session, so lots of bills. For education, revenue and expenditure issues were the focus this spring, but there were still a few education policy bills. There were about 360 education-related bills that were filed for the 18 regular session, and then we had about 300 carryover bills. And these bills were mostly about funding and pay increases, but there was also one about posting in God We Trust posters, and there was a bill that also authorized sunscreen applications. So apparently some school did not allow children to apply sunscreen. So our bills ranged from all over the place to the funding of teachers. The main thing I want to talk to you about are 2019 future policy legislative issues. The fallout from the veto referendum, and I was able to tune in on the oral arguments at the Supreme Court from those groups that filed protest against the United Taxpayers Unite, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. We just don't know where it's going. There's also a bill out there where you have to have 65% of your classroom instructional expenditure requirement, or there was the threat of consolidation within the county. And if you look at our county, we are the largest school, and the way we code specific expenditures, we have the lowest percentage. We do not meet that 65% threshold. But what's not counted, there's legislation that did not allow us to count our special education services, which that's directly related to instruction, our speech pathologists, our counselors, our school nurses, and other personnel. If we were to add those expenditures back in, we would have the highest percentage of classroom instruction expenditure. So there's a lot of personnel out there that aren't counted as classroom instructional, but we couldn't make them without them, and law mandates that we have them. There's fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 19 budget issues with the raises that Brenda talked about in the budget hearing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that with you as well. We had special sessions, 2 of them. We had concurrent session and we had regular session. We just need a long-term plan, not only for teacher pay raises, but also to adequately fund school operations. And here's one thing that our teachers came back saying, that nothing changed after the walkout, but one thing that our teachers got to do during the walkout was network with other teachers across the state, and they realized that supplies and materials and buildings are not an issue in Ponca City. It opened their eyes on the resources that we have. Our issue is cuts of electives and large class sizes. Tax reform and restructuring, we don't know how that's going to play out. Big thing, teacher pay and teacher shortage issues, and without a shadow of a doubt, if we got fully funded, even doubly fully funded tomorrow, the teacher crises would not change overnight. It would 4 years minimum before people would start going back into education. Curtis is at some training right now on how to recruit and retain talented teachers in Oklahoma. We have very few that we're all competing for. I heard that Tulsa still needed over 600 teachers. This is an issue, virtual charter school growth and accountability. There is a definite role for virtual charter schools in public education, but they've been in existence now for several years. So maybe their funding and accountability should be studied because they are receiving some state aid money. Here are some questions. They have extremely low graduation rates with virtual schools. Oftentimes, we'll have kids that will leave our district for a virtual charter school and then come back after October 1, and we don't get the funding for that student, and they are way behind. We see that frequently. There's no auditing of their funding or extracurricular funds. Attendance policies, they have reports of 100% attendance. You know, I know that it is virtual school, but they do have to meet with the teacher as well. So it would be interesting to audit their attendance, which public schools are carefully audited on that. Administrative costs, we don't have that breakdown on administrative costs for charter schools. And they also offer financial incentives to teachers and parents where public schools can't. Education reform and cost savings, a few things under there are administrative costs, and you hear a lot about that. In Oklahoma, the costs account for 3.76% of the total school district expenditures, and they're capped by state law. We rank 43rd nationally on the amount we spend per student on district and school administration, and we could hire 300 more administrators and still not reach the national average. I did not calculate hours specifically, but Oklahoma's students to administrator ratio is 238 students to every one administrator, and that includes the superintendent, assistant superintendents, principals, and assistant principals. School consolidation is a future issue for us. Since 2007, there have been 27 public school consolidations or annexes in Oklahoma, and these decisions were not made by the state. They were made through locally controlled decisions. But what I will tell you, since 2000, we've increased our charter and virtual charter schools by 33. So we've consolidated our annex 27 and increased our virtual and virtual charter by 33. So that's a concern. Many districts already share superintendents, treasurers, IT services, purchasing, and special education services, particularly smaller districts. And that's why their percentage of instructional costs looks higher than the larger districts, because they don't have those people on staff, which brings our instructional costs down because we can't count those people as instructional services. As far as vouchers and ESA, education savings accounts, I firmly believe that parents should be able to choose a private school education. Everyone does. However, the concern is that public dollars are being diverted from our underfunded public schools to fund private schools, often with little to no accountability on those taxpayer dollars or student outcomes like public schools have to face. And public schools serve 90% of Oklahoma's students. Let's talk just a little bit about the recap of the teacher pay raise, education funding. House Bill 1010XX is the major revenue bill passed by the legislature the week before the teacher walkout, if you'll remember that. It's expected to generate more than $428 million from these sources: increases in the GPT from 2 to 5, a $1 a pack cigarette tax, 3-cent tax on gas, and a 6-cent diesel tax. Senate Bill 1600 is this year's general appropriation, or the GA bill, $2.9 billion appropriated to Common Ed for fiscal year 19. We had a 19% increase in appropriations, which is a landmark for education. It includes funding for a teacher and support employee raise, a $33 million for textbook and instructional materials, and restoration of the year's $17 million funding cut. But as Brenda talked to you about that runs through the formula, and some schools are going to make out better than others. It depends on their enrollment and the weighted ADM, and we discussed that we knew that our enrollment went down from 16 to 17, 220 students. A little bit more about the funding. 1010XX is the revenue bill. 1023XX is the actual $353.5 million teacher pay raise bill. It will go into effect if not challenged or if not deemed constitutional by default of the Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite. It's a permanent raise for teachers, and this bill funds an average $6,100 teacher pay raise. It's the largest teacher pay raise in state history. It increases the minimum salary schedule by at least $5,001 at every level. It goes on up. So what I like about this is that it's tiered. It encourages our teachers with the most experience to stay with us longer. In fact, this year, and you all know this from our May board meeting, we had 8 total retirees. 5 of those were certified. I can't remember a year we didn't have between 25 and 30. Brenda, Brett, do you remember a year that we've had less than 30? Which tells us that teachers are anticipating a raise, so if they get that raise, stay in 3 more years, then their retirement will be based on that percentage more for the rest of their lives, for that matter. It provides larger raises for more experienced teachers, which I just discussed. It requires school districts to give the pay increase to teachers even if the district currently pays above the state minimum. And Brenda talked to you a little bit about this. We beat the state minimum by $1,600 at step 0, and the higher you get on the schedule, the more we beat the state minimum. However, our base does not meet the state minimum. Something that we do is we pay the teacher's retirement in full, their portion in full, as well as our required portion. And a lot of schools don't do that. We try to make that a point to our teachers, and when they're first coming in, they really don't think a lot about it with retirement, but you have to be a member of Oklahoma Teachers Retirement if you're a teacher in Oklahoma. Paying that is a huge benefit for our staff, and if they leave, if they're telling me they're leaving, I'll tell them, I don't think they pay your teacher retirement. Yes, I think they do. And they'll call me back, no, you were right, they don't. That money's gonna come right out of their check. With us, they never see it, never goes into their check, it never comes out, we just take care of it. House Bill 1026XX is the $52 million support employee pay raise, which grants a $1,250 raise to education support employee. Now, this bill will go into effect July 1, 2018, regardless of the veto referendum. And one thing that we had discussed doing is we negotiate. We're the district that negotiates with our certified, and we never give a raise to our support or to our administrators until we negotiate with our teachers first. We're not going to be able to negotiate with our teachers really quickly because we don't know what's going to happen with the veto referendum, but we were advised by our employment attorney that we have to start the raise beginning July 1. Now, that doesn't mean that our July 1 paycheck is going to reflect the raise, but our 12-month people will start earning the higher salary on July 1, and it will be paid the end of July when our regular payroll. So on our board agenda for July, we will have the new support salary schedules with the raises on those. And we'll talk more about that next month. Let's talk about State Question 799. We've talked about what a veto referendum is. It's a provision that is allowed in the Oklahoma Constitution. It's rarely used, but it can be filed challenging any bill passed by the legislature. To put a veto referendum on the ballot requires collecting legal signatures equal to 5% of the voters in the last gubernatorial election, and I think it was 41,424. We say about 42,000 signatures. Easy to get, but I was talking to some people about this today. I haven't seen anyone collecting signatures anywhere. That you may have seen some things on the news that there were some petitions set out at some convenience stores, and the convenience store says, that's not true, we don't have those petitions. So don't know where they stand on that. There have been 20 veto referendums in Oklahoma history, but none since 1970. Now, there was an initiative petition back when House Bill 1017 was passed, but as far as a veto referendum, there has not been one since 1970. What bill is being challenged? And this is where the question all arises. The Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite group is challenging House Bill 1010XX. This was the revenue package, and it was the GPT, the cigarette tax, and the tax on fuel and diesel. It was helping fund a lot of things with education and state employee pay raises and create additional revenue to fund core services. Now, the Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite group is clear that they're not protesting 1023XX, which is the teacher pay raise bill. So what if the signatures are collected? You would think that it would be possible to get 41,424 signatures if they get started. They have a July 18th deadline. The tax increase in House Bill 1010XX will be put on hold if they get the legal signatures. And we will have to verify that all those signatures are validated. Referendum challenges. Oklahoma law provides several ways for citizens to challenge referendum petitions, and you may have heard that there are some challenges. Currently, there are 2 to the sufficiency of the petition before the Oklahoma State Supreme Court. There was a protest filed by POE, which is Professional Oklahoma Educators First. Then there was a protest filed by the taxpayers and education associations, including COSA, OSSBA, and OEA. And both challenges are set for oral argument today at 2 o'clock, and I tuned into that, and I'm telling you, the attorneys for both sides, the justices really had some tough questions for both sides, so it was quite interesting. We'll see what happens from that. The protest filed by POE, COSA, OSSBA, OEA, and then there were some others, asked the state Supreme Court to find the petition legally insufficient based on the following deficiencies. A description of the bill at the top of each signature sheet omits mission and discussion of the little cigar tax, the hotel motel tax increases originally authorized in House Bill 1010XX. This is the gist or the summary of the bill. And the arguments today were, well, the little cigar tax and the hotel motel tax was repealed. Why do we have to put that in our gist or our summary? If the people are signing this, they have to know what the total bill is. So that's one of the arguments. They did not explain the bill clearly. They're saying that those were repealed out of there. The description is misleading and written backwards, stating approval of the state question would repeal House Bill 1010XX. And I'll show you some proposed wording. And basically, the arguments today that I was watching, it should say that you don't approve State Question 799, you repeal 1010XX, or the public vetoes 1010XX. It's very misleading. The referendum petition doesn't include an exact copy of the bill that would be referred to the people. And there is no mention as to what House Bill 1010XX will fund. It's not just education, and the arguments today were, well, when House Bill 1010XX was presented to the legislators, it didn't talk about what the funding, and one of the Supreme Court justices said, well, maybe that's because they had the accompanying bill, 1023XX, and they knew that that it was connected to House Bill 1010XX. So is it purposefully trying to deceive the community? That's what our groups are asking the Supreme Court to find the petition legally insufficient. If they do, the date doesn't change. They still have until July 18th. So here's what it would look like. The proposed ballot title for referendum on House Bill 1010XX, as signed by the governor of the state of Oklahoma. This measure seeks to repeal House Bill 1010XX. It talks about the bill passed during the second special session. It raised the gasoline tax, the GPT, the cigarette tax, but you notice that it doesn't mention the little cigar and the hotel tax. So the question is, 1023 is contingent upon the enactment of 1010XX. So some of the discussions today, was 1010 really enacted since the little cigar tax was repealed and since the hotel motel tax was repealed? We're not going to know until the Supreme Court decides on that. So it's pretty deceiving. So one of the justices today said that it should not say, shall the proposal be approved? He suggested, shall the proposal be appealed or vetoed? Let's say, hey, I'm all about taxes. Well, you might circle yes if you're not a clearly informed voter, but actually, if you are for the proposal or sign your name for a petition, you're actually repealing the revenue. So that was filed with the Oklahoma Secretary of State on May 1st of 2018. Why does this matter to educators? Well, in House Bill 1023XX in Section 3, it says the provisions of this act shall be contingent upon the enactment of the provisions of the enrolled House bill. Remind you, the enrolled House bill included those two pieces that got repealed. So has 1010 been enacted? That hasn't been decided. Section 4 says this act shall become effective August 1st, 2018. Section 5 says it being immediately necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, or safety, an emergency is hereby declared to exist by reason whereof this act shall take effect and be in full force from and after its passage and approval. So here's the big question. Does State Question 799 affect the teacher pay raise mandated in House Bill 1023XX? Well, obviously, the teachers' union say that it is enacted. The arguments today, even by OSSBA and COSA attorneys, feel that it's enacted, but that the teacher pay raise is mandated, but has 1010 really been enacted? And one of the justices told one of the arguing attorneys, said, hey, what do you think? And he said, well, I think that the teacher pay raise is mandated. He said, but it would be constitutional crises. And she said, hey, we've been in 2 special sessions this year. We've had concurrent sessions. The state will have to figure it out. It will be a hardship for districts. We'll make it for a year. We likely make it 2 years because, as Brenda mentioned, we'll have a hefty carryover for fiscal year 19. We had a retired superintendent from Norman here today, and he said Norman wouldn't even make it a year. So we're sitting pretty good with our carryover, so it's yet to be determined what will happen. I will tell you that the Attorney General did submit a brief, and he did acknowledge that, his exact quote, regardless of whatever happens with a future referendum on 1010XX, which is the revenue, this would not affect the teacher pay raise provided by House Bill 1023XX. However, he went on to say that this is a difficult question, and he urged the court to provide authoritative guidance on how the petition and state question should affect teacher pay raise. Joy Hoffmeister, our state superintendent of public instruction, has requested that the Attorney General give an expedient opinion to schools so we can plan and move forward. We'll see what will happen on that. So our next step for schools, and they told us this over and over at our COSA meeting last week, and Brenda stated this, is that we just have to be patient, because typically right now we would not be committing to a salary increase till we know just exactly what our state aid funding would be and how our carryover is ending up. Ours is significant, purposeful because we knew of the decline in enrollment. It just hit that this raise, 1023XX and our decline hit at the same time. Another thing, the impact of the veto referendum is unknown until the Supreme Court advises on the two challenges that were heard today. We hear we should know in a week or so. There are certain groups who are pushing for us to go ahead and give the 70% raise that we have been told that we might get, but who can predict state revenue? And there's a problem with that. Let's say we have the funding and we went ahead and gave that. There's continuing contract laws. You can't make less than you did the year before. Then we're just stuck in that pattern. So obviously, our employment attorneys are telling us to hold off on the teacher pay raises and the administrative pay raise. But to move forward is not effective with the support pay raises. Obviously, no one wants to give a raise and then have staff pay it back if there's not funding to support it. So there's where we are with education.
Questions? Thank you.
Good job.
Sorry that was so long.
I
tried to hurry through it.
That was good.
Next item will be the consent agenda. Would like a motion to approve our consent agenda.
I move we can approve it.
Have a motion by David, and second by Robin. Is that you? Thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Newsom.
Aye.
Mr. Riley.
Aye.
Mrs. Troop.
Aye.
Mrs. Zimmershed.
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid.
Aye.
Motion passed. Thank you. Next item will be discuss and take action on the following district's financial reports. Had a good meeting in financial. Kept Robin on his toes.
So I'll move we approve 6.1.
All right, thanks, Robin. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by David.
Oh, it's okay.
No discussion, roll call.
Mr. Riley.
Aye.
Mrs. Troop.
Aye.
Mrs. Zimmershed.
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid.
Aye.
Mr. Newsom.
Right. Motion passed. Next item will be 6.2, consider and take action on the district's budget for fiscal year 19. After hearing our big report,
I move we accept 6.2.
I second it.
have a motion by David, second by Nancy for 6.2. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Troop.
Aye.
Mrs. Zimmershed.
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid.
Aye.
Mr. Newsom.
Aye.
Mr. Riley.
Aye.
Motion passed. Thank you. Next one will be 6.3, consider and take action on the transfer of funds from Co-op Fund 12 to General Fund 11. A motion to approve that item. Curtis, may have questions.
Yeah. Brenda, will you explain that penny difference?
Yeah.
She's just cleaning up the books.
It's just cleaner. We used to have a co-op fund with Ponca and Ponca, and it was Title III money, and we were the keeper of the money, and then we would pay invoices for them and stuff. And when the co-op fund was done, we have had a penny in there forever. So I just asked the auditor how we can get rid of that penny, and so she told us to just do an agenda item saying that we can transfer that penny from the co-op fund into the general fund.
So it takes board approval to transfer a penny.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
We have carried it for years, and I just thought, you know, she told me at some point.
Okay, I move we approve 6.3 then.
Robin likes this one here.
We're up a penny.
Thank you, Robin.
I'm pretty anal on some of the budget stuff, but for a penny?
Do I have a second?
Yes, I second.
Oh.
Thank you, David. No discussion, roll call.
Mrs. Zimmershed.
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid.
Aye.
Mr. Newsom.
Aye.
Mr. Riley.
Aye.
Mrs. Troop.
Aye.
Motion passed, thank you. Next item is 6.4. Board to consider and take action on a motion approving in the renewal of the sublease agreement dated March 1st, 16 between the district and Kay County Public Buildings Authority for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019, as required under the provisions of the agreement.
What is this, Brenda?
Affirmative action.
Affirmative, that's just something we have to do every year.
How about a little more detailed? I mean, $22,000 for something just to do?
That's on your auditorium, I think, your 99-year lease.
The penny is, the dollar is on the 99-year lease. And the affirmative action that we do, it's just a procedural thing that we have to approve each year.
Why would the which auditorium? What are you talking
Well,
about?
you've got some financing that is a lease, and.
It's more than the city's agreement with us.
Yeah.
That's, the city's is just $1.
Oh, okay, well, whatever one it is, you have to.
99 years.
You have to approve the lease each year. And that's what that is.
So do we know what this lease is for?
I remember
Nothing came across my desk, but I know that's what
something
that
dated
is.
back in March.
This is just the sublease, that's the, that's the amount we have to pay each year for the sublease through, that first.
For who?
But we don't pay that
Isn't that a pass-through for lease revenue bonds?
It's a pass-through thing, we don't pay the $22,655. And actually, I think that's supposed to be 22 million. Isn't that the 22,655
Yeah.
total lease revenue bond? I think that 22,655 is correct amount.
Well, let's table this baby, and I
I'll
want it back
table
with the
that
right
one.
numbers and bring it back next month.
I move we table
Do we
6.4.
don't need to do it, do we?
It came from Stephen McDonald. He's the one that sent us the language in.
Well-
Explain it a little
We
bit.
did it last July.
No, we
The
need
only
to,
thing that you finance through the K County Public Buildings Authority is the auditorium, so it relates to that.
We've done.
No, it's for the whole lease
It's
revenue
for all
bonds.
of our.
It's the lease
Right.
revenue bonds.
Yeah, the bond issue.
That's so we can get all the money all at once to do these.
but we need to check to find out for sure on this 22. I think we should table this item, and
I move we table 6.4 till next month's meeting. A little more clarity.
we need a second,
That's fine.
David.
Yeah.
Why don't you roll call that, and we'll, if you would.
Okay. Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop? Aye. Mrs. Zimmershed?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid? Mr. Newsom?
Aye. Thank you. Bring that back to us and make sure on that, dollar-wise, is that correct, too? Next item will be 6.5, consider and take action on appointment of board authorization for the following positions for the 2018-2019 school year. Make a motion to approve.
Discuss Jan Miller? No.
Nothing changed on our district treasurer, purchasing agent, assistant treasurer, district encumbrance clerk. We just have to approve it every year.
Nancy,
Board
do you-
I
appointment.
move that we approve on
Nancy
6.5.
approved. You going to do the second, David?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
David,
So who
did-
was it?
Nancy
Okay.
did it.
Oh, I didn't hear it.
Nancy
Okay.
did approval, and then David's
You're
going
on
to second.
6.7, aren't you?
No, 6.
No, we were
6.5.
6.5.
6.5.
5.
Page.
Oh, I skipped a page. Okay.
You're on it.
I'm there. There's your
Just
name.
keep your job another year.
Get it. Not paid.
Roll call.
Mr. Newsom.
Aye.
Mr. Riley.
Aye.
Mrs. Troop. Mrs. Zimmershed.
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid.
Aye.
6.6, consider and take action on the OSSAA application for conducting pilot cooperative activities program between the Ponca City Schools and the First Lutheran School.
We've contracted, we've done a cooperative on contract with Lutheran Junior High Sports since 1989, and I think we'd done it several years before it was required to actually have the board approve a cooperative. And just some questions on private school kids participating with public schools kids in our events, in our athletics, our sports activities. We've just kind of had a general agreement to do that since they do become our students typically in high school. So we had some questions on that, and that's if we want to go ahead and do that again. I do recommend it for this year if we start having the discussions that we may want to move away from that. I would rather give Lutheran an upfront notice.
I move we accept 6.6.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. David, and a second from Robin for 6.6. Any other discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
This is just for this year.
It has to be renewed every year. Usually, it's combined in the consent agenda, but I made it a separate agenda item.
Aye.
Mrs. Zimmershed?
No.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye. 6.7, motion passed. Thank you. 6.7, consider and take action on change order number 1 to the West Middle School remodel and addition.
Yeah.
This is that resealer and floor
Yeah.
stuff that we talked about in the,
In the floor, they found out they had too much
Right.
pH in it,
Yeah.
basically, and it takes a sealer in order to give us the warranty, and it takes that much to get it done. It's pretty expensive. And that's as low as we could possibly get it. It started out at about 300 grand when we first started, so.
but a motion to approve.
I move we approve 6.7.
I'll go ahead and second that.
Okay, David motioned it, and Nancy did a second on 6.7. Any other discussion? None, roll call.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mrs. Zimmershed? Aye. Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Motion passed. Thank you. What's next? Missed a page.
Lots of contracts.
Oh, yeah, 6.8, consider and take action on the following contract agreements. A is with the agreement with PageMaster's website design and development for the website, district's website. B is agreement with Lawful Wetzel for the commercial insurance package renewal with the state, Oklahoma State Insurance Group, as recommended by the superintendent. C is agreement with Linda B. Johnson for the services for 2018 and 19. D is agreement with Edmund for Study Island and Reading Egg software, just a big software program. Is that what that is?
All of our elementary schools use it.
And E is ratification of contract with CenterPoint Energy, a third-party natural gas provider to the district. And the next one will be F, agreement with Wilson, Dotson and Associates to provide an annual audit of financial affairs and transactions of all funds and activities in the district. And G is renewal of the Oklahoma Schools Assurance Group for the workers' compensation insurance for 2018. And H is an agreement with Nextevia, is that what it is, Nextevia? To provide phone services. This, I don't remember, I asked that, is this a new one, or is this the same group that we've always?
Same one we've been doing for the last year or so.
Last year? Okay.
We dropped our phone calls.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Get rid of
Had to spend a little money to
Right,
make
to
some
get
money.
That's not
And
bad.
then I was the agreement with American Telephone for the purchase of Panasonic phone lines. This one here saves us a lot of money.
Well, this one here is we're replacing our entire PBXs. I understand I'm talking about replacing PBXs. Our existing PBXs no longer have any capacity on them. And so we went to go move AT&T phone lines off to connect up our elevators into our phone system and get them off AT&T lines. We can't do that until we put in a new phone system because we're maxed out capacity. So we're going to combine the two existing PBXs we have. We have one at the old admin building and one at the high school. We're going to take that down to one bigger PBX, put it down there, the old admin building, and we'll have enough to, basically we'll have enough to expand out to about 3,000 phones. That's the next step up. We're never going to get to 3,000 phones, hopefully, but that's where we will be able to go to. So we won't ever have a problem with running out of space.
So what's the 160,000? What do we get for it right
We're
now?
up in AT&T. Everything with AT&T. That will get rid of, once we get this new system in, we can go with the new phones.
You'll still get T1 lines or whatever from AT&T.
Everything from AT&T, no, it will all be gone. We won't have any, once this is put in, You give me about a month and let me.
So we're paying a lease right now to AT&T for all the phone service at $160 a year.
We've been paying 160 because that covers long distance, that covers all the other stuff, so we're dumping all that out. With Next Even, we don't pay long distance service, it's SIP, so it's basically all going to our internet. So that's one reason we upgraded our internet pipe last year to get more, so we have phone service room for that. And do some QoS on our network so they can, phone calls coming through, they're okay.
Why didn't we do this earlier if we're saving that much
In the
money?
old days, basically, E-rate paid for all of your phone service. So
They
no
paid the
one-
160?
Yeah, E-rate paid for all of our phone service.
95% of
Okay.
your
And then E-rate started going like this, they said, well, we're only 20% off every year, and
Okay.
now we're at, hey, we're not paying for any of your phone service anymore, you're done, you account on your own.
Oh,
So we
okay.
recognize that we're looking, hey, phone bills are $160,000 a year. We gotta do something, because that's a lot.
Yeah, that is.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
I guess I already talked about I. J, agreement with Gary Bracken, attorney law for his engagement as a attorney for our district. K is agreement with Ed Skills for English language learners support service. And L is agreement with Sherry Holder to provide virtual visual impairment services for the district. And M with Cynthia Lumpkin to provide Braille and certified visual impaired services. And N is maintenance agreement with Stanley Systems for the district's copy machines. I'd like to have a motion to approve these contracts, if I could get one.
I'll move that we accept all these contract agreements.
A through N? Okay. Do we have a second?
Just real quick, didn't we talk about the copy machines last time? What, just?
Yeah.
And that was with this? I'm just trying to remember what it was that we were talking, she was just going through them, is that what it was?
Mm-hmm, yes.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
That
Did you-
wasn't a second.
That's what I'm saying. Do we have a
Is
second?
that a second,
Have a
Nancy?
motion.
Oh, sure, yes, 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 I motioned a second.
Discussion? Any other questions?
We actually talked about every one of these contracts. in
Yeah, we did.
finance.
Yes.
We went over every one of them.
Yeah. But the 160 was the best one of the group. Whenever we get that going. All right.
Roll call.
Yes, roll call. I'm sorry.
Mrs. Zimmershed?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
We're going to need executive. Next item will be 6.9, motion and vote to convene in executive session desired for the following purposes: to discuss possible termination, reassignment, resignation, and employment of personnel on the attached detailed personnel report, discuss negotiations, and to discuss confidential conversations with the board's attorney concerning pending claims and litigation. Need an executive session. Have a motion?
Resign.
Yeah, I motion.
Oh, do you have-
Second.
Second from David, or from Robin. Roll call.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mrs. Zimmershed?
Aye.
Aye, we're in executive session. Turn to open session.
Sorry.
Minutes for kept in executive session will remain confidential. 6:12 is consider and take action on the termination, reassignment, resignation, and employment of personnel. Like a motion to approve our personnel reports.
Move to approve it.
Second it.
Motion from Robin, second from Nancy for 6.12. No other discussion, roll call?
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mrs. Zimmershed?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
No new business, I don't believe.
Nope.
All right, I've got a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Have a second?
I will second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Well, we're adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the week.